Welcome to Season 2 of The Shift, Stories of Resistance and Resilience, a multi-platform conversation series produced and hosted by me, Mark Charles Rivera, the professional storyteller. I believe that stories have the power to change the world. Through honest conversations and powerful storytelling, we explore how people challenge systems, shift narratives, and transform culture, creating a more inclusive, just, and liberated world in our lives and in our work. Here on this podcast, you'll hear from changemakers, truth tellers, and community builders who are using their voices and their stories to move us forward. So if you believe in the power of storytelling to spark change, you're in the right place. Listen closely, take notes, recognize our shared humanity. This is The Shift. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to The Shift, Stories of Resistance and Resilience. I have been having the best guests this season, and there's no shade to season one guests because I love all my guests equally. But I've had so many great conversations this season with authors and fellow storytellers. And today's guest is someone I've met through our work in dance. And when I saw his video teaser about his new book, I knew he had to be on this season of the podcast. So before I jump in and introduce my guest formally, I just want to remind you to like, rate, and subscribe to this podcast. It is a labor of love. It costs money and time. And so I want to encourage you to support. And more importantly, buy the author's book. If you are listening to a conversation with the author and you feel inspired and moved by their work, support them. Okay? Moving book volumes, moving units in book sales matters to the authors, especially when so many of us are, less well known or less established. Every sale matters. Every pre-sale matters. Every actual purchase matters after the fact. So please support the authors. Their books, their websites will always be linked in the show notes. Without further ado, allow me to introduce my colleague, fellow storyteller, fellow Boricuas, Rodney Eric López, is an accomplished educator, artist, and nonprofit leader. His diverse professional background includes successful tenures in teaching artistry in public schools in New York City and beyond, training, coaching, and facilitation, corporate communications and public relations, and executive nonprofit leadership. Rodney served as executive director of dancing classrooms in New York City, where he led program growth, supported new business efforts, oversaw training and professional development, and served as the face of the organization and stewardship of its 20 national and international affiliates. His teaching work with dancing classrooms is featured in the Paramount Classic hit documentary, Mad Hot Ballroom. He is a master instructor of Latin and social dance and has taught children and adults the art of dance both for personal enjoyment and as a powerful tool for team and community building. He founded Current RI, a giving circle dedicated to engaging men of color in philanthropic purpose. Rodney holds a BS in Communication Studies from New York University, where he was a Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Scholar, and a certificate in Spiritual Entrepreneurship from the Glean Network and Columbia Business School. And he is the author of the book, I Don't Speak Spanish, but I Understand Everything When I'm Dancing, an exploration of language, identity, and salsa. He's my guest today on The Shift. Welcome, Rodney. ¿Cómo está?
Bien, gracias. Thank you, Mark. Thank you for that beautiful introduction. And just as importantly, thank you for your appeal to your audience to support authors with buying a book if they're moved to and if they're inspired by the topic. And this is my first foray into publishing, and so that means a lot. So thank you for that.
And what a great introduction to you as a writer.
Thank you.
I have to tell you, it is both. It's memoir meets historical context meets. It's just so important. I've been crying every episode conversation this today. I've done 3 interviews today, y'all, which is unusual for me, to be fair. But it's because I'm just deeply an empath. And when I saw the video teaser on Facebook that you posted about the book, immediately I stopped. I stopped in my tracks and I said, oh my gosh, I feel so seen.
Mm.
As my mother was born in the Isla, but she grew up on the mainland. You and I, you're Nuyorican, I'm Jersey Rican, even though I was born in Miami, grew up in Jersey. So I just saw so much of myself instantly.
Yes.
And although I can't speak Spanish well, I do understand it well.
Mm-hmm.
And for some reason, I can dance well too, right? So when I dance salsa, merengue, I just feel so it's just innately in our bones and our DNA, but it doesn't always translate to the language. And so when I saw that video, I just knew I had to have you on the show. So thank you so much for accepting my invite.
Of course. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. And so I always ask my guests this, who are you outside of the professional highlights I read in your bio? Because, the bios always give us the professional highlights, but
Yeah.
who is Rodney outside of work?
Rodney outside of work is a few things. I think first, I'm a husband and a father, and I've been married 12 years to my lovely wife. We just celebrated our 12th wedding anniversary last weekend.
Congratulations. Happy anniversary.
Thank you. I have two wonderful sons that um, that I'm proud to be their dad. They live with their mom in New Jersey, actually, um, but but they are 21 and 22 years old, and I couldn't be prouder of the young men they're becoming. So those are two really important roles that occupy my life. I have grown in both of those roles in really important ways, and in both in being a spouse and in being a dad. Or those are two roles where you really, and I don't mean this to be hyperbole, you really do learn to let go of like a certain amount of self-centeredness, because I was most of my life a self-centered person, and not necessarily in a bad way.
Where you also are a dancer, right? So that's part of our DNA.
We like that. We like applause,
Yeah.
and that's okay. And yet, when you have to sort of give up a little bit of that selfishness and really sort of start to think about your life through the eyes of other people, actually, it's a gift. And
Uh-huh.
so for me, that's how I've grown. I think the other thing I'll say about outside of my bio is I also consider myself a spiritual seeker. I have had an on again, off again relationship with religion and spirituality, and so a big part of who I am is trying to figure out, asking those existential questions of who am I beyond my work and my title in life. And so I really see myself as on a spiritual journey. And actually, this book and the content of this book is,
Yeah.
even though the text is not spiritual, I think some of the subtext is spiritual, because it's
Sure.
very much about finding wholeness. And I think that's the ultimate goal of spirituality, is to find wholeness and unity with the divine. So, so I'm very much a spiritual seeker as well.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. As you know, the subtitle of this podcast is Stories of Resistance and Resilience. And it really started, as I told you, the podcast first started out as a LinkedIn audio series in 2023, when we had stories related to holistic inclusion and belonging. And then Trump ran for office again. And I said, I think we need to switch to a multi-platform series, number one. And number two, I think the subtitle of the podcast needs to shift, no pun intended, to meet the moment. And so what started off as holistic inclusion and belonging became stories of resistance and resilience. And it's been like that now. This is season 2 of the podcast, through the multi-platform series approach. And it's because I think more than ever, we need to have conversations about identity, about belonging, but we need to really be able to hear one another's stories, because I believe that stories can serve as a window or a mirror, a window of understanding into a life experience that is not your own or similar to yours, and a mirror that reflects parts of who you are, so you can stop being so isolated. I think that the reason why these factions have formed the way they have, us versus the MAGA versus far left, is because we stopped listening to each other, speaking to each other, to find our shared humanity. And I think that at the core, any good book reflects our shared humanity. And I think you've done that so beautifully. And I don't speak Spanish, but I understand everything when I'm dancing. As someone who also, as you know, I didn't grow up knowing Spanish well, and even now I don't speak it that well. I speak enough to get by, but I understand every word. And so that was the one context between you and I that differed. And we'll talk more about that in a second, but I have to ask you, given this moment that we're in, as the Latino community continues to be under attack because of ICE, what is your personal concept of resistance and resilience in this moment?
It's an important question. It's a powerful question. And frankly, I struggle with the answer, not because I struggle with the question, but because I think there's a lot of ways to answer it, even in my own personal life. So I'm going to try my best to answer it in the context in which you framed it. I think for me, my personal concept of, I'll start with resistance. My personal concept of resistance is in telling your story unfiltered, telling your story your way. We in this, I'll say Western civilization, but more specifically, this United States context that we are raised in. If you're listening to this podcast and you are in the United States and you were raised in the United States, we have been educated in our schools with a very Anglo-American centric view of the world. And that our African American, our Afro-Caribbean, our, however you want to put it, our stories have been marginalized.
Yeah.
Our stories have been relegated to very tiny boxes, if they're even mentioned at all.
Yeah.
We have long, proud histories of resistance, of contribution that we in our schools never get to share or never get to learn.
Yeah.
One of the chapters of my book is Je parle français, learning how to speak French in the Bronx. And I was in the quote unquote top class, the smart class in junior high school. And we were told, now this is a school in the Bronx where it's mostly almost all Black and Latino kids and a smattering of white kids. And because we were the top class, we were told you're going to take French because the assumption was that smarter kids should be taking French. Because French is seen as more sophisticated, more elite, more worldly. Meanwhile, the vast majority of the kids in that building come from Spanish-speaking families and can't speak Spanish. But that wasn't considered good enough because that would have been considered too easy because we should have been speaking Spanish at home.
Right.
And so this was an assumption made by the people in authority in the education system in New York City. Our language wasn't good enough to learn in our own community. And so that is just a small example of the ways in which our culture, our languages are sidelined in an official context.
Yeah.
And so for me, resilience is being able to say, wait a minute, there's value in my language. There's value in my accent. There's value in my ability to remix Spanish and English and create something called Spanglish, which the dominant culture says is an aberration, is a bastardization.
Yeah.
What I call that is resilience. What I call that is the ability to code switch so that I can talk with abuela at home and I can also talk with my friend on the board.
Yeah.
And so language is rich with the ability to resist and be resilient. And I feel like for me, doing that, not just in spoken language, but in the language of the body and in movement, And so that's what salsa has been for me. Salsa has been an opportunity for me to be resilient in my Nuyoricanness,
Yeah.
because salsa is this uniquely Nuyorican contribution to popular culture. So that's my response.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And I think, we saw this with Bad Bunny, right? We saw how much people were like on the right were reacting so negatively, and how, it's America, they should be English speaking. And, Spanish is spoken quite a bit all over the world, and so is English. And America doesn't have an official language, right? It's not just, we don't just officially speak English, right? And I think that, and my outfit today, I have to pay homage to the Latinas and Latinx people in the Nuyorican, Jersey Rican movement, with the gold hoop, the red lip, the gold necklace. It's a very intentional choice today. Um, and I purposely wore red lipstick and the gold hoop to pay homage to the fierce Latinx folks I know in New York City, in Jersey. Um, but it's also part of my identity as a I'm presenting Boricua man, right? That this is part of my makeup, right? This is part of who I am. And I want to jump into the book because it is so. I read an excerpt. You and I were able to schedule this interview pretty quickly because of our truncated production timeline. And I got to read an excerpt. And then I just got the physical copy, so I cannot wait. I'm actually traveling to Puerto Rico
Awesome.
for a work trip on Wednesday. And I will be reading this on the plane and reading this in my downtime in the conference. And I just want to thank you, first and foremost, for writing a book that I feel hasn't really been written yet in the way that it should. I think often when we hear Latinx authors, if they are talking about Latinidad in the U.S., it's usually through an immigrant lens.
That's right.
Right? It's not a lot of books out there of the Boricua lens, per se, at least not in this context. That's why I published my first book, Drafts, because there was no book about a Puerto Rican queer disabled kid talking about things that I was talking about. I didn't see myself, right? And I know that this book, there's going to be so many, not just Nuyorican and Jersey Ricans, but second generation Latinx people in general, who are going to see this book and read this book and feel so seen and so heard. And also know that it's not impossible to reclaim a part of your identity that was assimilated out of you. And I have to ask you this in your new book, again, you share something really popular your mother said that kind of triggered this core memory for you in childhood. And she writes, or you write in the book, habla español para que él no entiende, which translates to, even me speaking Spanish right now makes me feel a little subconscious because I don't have an accent that sounds Puerto Rican, but it's fine. Which translates to speaking Spanish so he won't understand. And when I saw the video that we talked about your book, that moment made me pause. For me, as you may know, growing up in a bicultural household, my mom's ex-boyfriend, a black man from the South, didn't want us speaking in Spanish in the house. So I grew up learning how to understand, but not being able to speak it. This has been a huge source of shame for me. But in chapter 2, you explained that your lack of Spanish wasn't a personal failing or your parents' negligence, but the predictable outcome of systemic forces, xenophobia, and assimilationist policy that made Spanish acquisition for second generation kids an uphill battle by design. How do we begin to help second generation folks release the shame and embrace themselves, despite the perceived lack of ability to speak Spanish well, if at all?
I'm grateful for the deep thought you put into this question and couching it in the language of the book. I want to say two things as part of my response to this question. First is that this book, you know how they say if you don't see the book that's meant for you, you should write it. like I think that's what this was, unintentional. Or I shouldn't say unintentional. It was very intentional, but it was more like I didn't know that this was going to come out of me, right? Number two is I do hope that it speaks to the Puerto Rican diasporic community wherever they live.
Yeah.
But when I have been giving talks on this subject, what brought me to tears is the Chinese people, the Indian people, the Haitian Creole people who said, that's my story too.
Yeah. Just
Right?
different language. Same script, different language.
Just a different language. That's right. So there's something about this U.S. assimilationist project that has us all caught in its net.
Yeah.
So here's the thing I want to say. This book is for two kinds of people. It's more, but I'm distilling it. It's for people who can't speak their heritage language and feel shame about it, or for people who can speak their heritage language but feel guilt because they can't transmit it to their children. Because there's two aspects of that story.
Yeah.
In my experience, in one body, there's both. Both as the son whose parents did not speak Spanish to him, and as the dad who cannot transmit Spanish to his kids. Both of those experiences live in this body.
Yeah.
And so what I want to say to anybody who's listening to this is that we are conditioned in this country to sometimes personalize deficits that are not ours to personalize.
Yeah.
We are made to feel shame because we can't do something, but there are larger institutional forces at work that work against us being able to do that.
And that's by design.
Oh, it's by design. It's completely by design. And so my parents, okay, now I don't want to take away the power of the individual choice, because there is individual choice here, right? But it's mitigated by these larger forces. So when my mother would talk to my dad in the house and say, "Habla en español para que él no entiende," right? What my mother was doing in that moment was making a choice. She was saying, "You and I are about to have," meaning her and my father, "we're about to have an adult conversation. And so instead of telling me, Rodney, go outside and play, Rodney, go to another room and watch TV," what they did was they used the language as a curtain against me.
Yeah.
It was the quickest way to X me out of the conversation. So my earliest memories of the language are as a tool of separation between me and my parents. Right? And so and I carried resentment over that, Mark. For decades, was resentful over those choices.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I interviewed my mom for this book. She was the first person I interviewed. My father passed away 2 years ago, so I couldn't talk to him about it. But my mother, I said, she's the first person I have to talk to. And she told me, as a grown-ass man, she told me, we didn't do that because we were discriminated against coming from Puerto Rico. We were made fun of because we couldn't speak English. We were made fun of because people thought we were dumb because we couldn't speak English. So we didn't want you to have to go through that. We wanted English to be your only language. We wanted you to speak it well. We didn't want you to speak English with a Spanish accent.
Yeah.
Right? So that tells me two things. Number one is even well-intentioned decisions can have really powerful consequences that last decades. That's
centuries even, right? This idea around assimilation, I mean, this has been happening. Again, we're talking to the Puerto Rican lens because you and I are both Puerto Rican, and it's just easier. And it's so funny because for me, my sister, an Afro-Latina, can read and write it well, fluent. And often it is a tale of one home but different experiences of our mother, right? So she also grew up partly with my grandmother, who only speaks Spanish. Like, my grandmother said, "Fuck your assimilation. I'm only gonna speak Spanish," even when living on the mainland, living in Florida, right? And so that's why I understand it, because she would never speak to me in English. And now, as a grown-ass man, I'm FaceTiming my grandmother, and we're having this, like, struggling to have a conversation around right? And so my grandmother and I had to learn our own shorthand. Because
Yes.
whenever I tried speaking Spanish to her, she would struggle. And my grandma does speak more Spanish, more English than she let on, but she
Sure.
refuses to speak it. And so I had no choice but to learn how to understand Spanish because otherwise I wouldn't be able to communicate with her at all,
That's
right?
right.
And so there was a Spanish
Yeah.
coming from my ears, English coming out of my mouth, and now with my great aunt Gloria, she texts, which is she's like in her 80s, and I'm like, she's such a great texter. Now with Google Translate, she writes it in Spanish. I translate it to when I can't read certain things, I'll translate it to English. I write it in English, translate it to Spanish for her, and bam, the language gap is no longer there. But it was this idea around trying to protect us, right? Trying from my mother, it was, hey, this bothers this man who I'm dating, who we're living with. Let's not piss him off,
You are
right?
going to find, oh, I can't wait for you to, you're going to find stories in this book that
Yeah,
absolutely resonate with your experience.
yeah,
And to add to that, just like the difference in the experience with your sister,
yeah.
grandmother, and your mother, this families create I'm going to call it interfamilial teams or
Yes.
interfamilial tribes within tribes, because based on your relationship to American assimilationism, you
Mhm.
are going to make different choices. But the
Even your birth order, right? How your birth order might
birth
affect.
order has so much to do with it. Birth order has everything to do with the older you are, the more likely you are to speak Spanish.
Yeah,
If you are in a household that, let's say, has multiple children in it,
yeah, yeah.
um, and what you have access to educationally, there's so many things at play. So when people, the thing that I bristle at the most, and I'm very forgiving of lots of things. The thing that I bristle at the most, and I think this is partly kind of who I wrote the book for. Well, I wrote it because I want people to heal from this stuff, and
Yeah.
I'll get to that later because you have another question for me about this, I think. But um, is when people say, "Well, you should just learn it."
Mhm.
Nothing's stopping you from taking a class. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
well, I got one better for you. So what I did was, Mark, in high school, I took Spanish. I said, you know what? I don't want to feel like this anymore. So I took that year of French in ninth grade. That was a disaster. And so I took Spanish in high school. And guess what? I was good at it. I aced all my exams. I got 100 on my Spanish Regents. But guess what? I was made fun of because my Spanish sounded like it came from a textbook. I sounded like a gringo speaking Spanish.
Mhm.
I didn't sound like a Boricua.
All the time. My sister literally said it to me when I was in Puerto Rico and I FaceTimed her to translate for me because the Uber driver and I were having a hard time translating with each other.
So you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. If you don't speak Spanish, you're somehow less than, you're not Puerto Rican enough. And then
Yeah.
if you learn how to speak later in life, then it's like, yeah, but you don't sound like one of us. There's always an out group and an in group.
Or if you're born in the mainland but not on the island, or you don't live on the island but you live on the main, right? There is not you're never enough. Fill
You're
in the blank.
never, and that's the key, Mark. As you know, it's this idea of not enough.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm trying with this book to
Yeah.
put to bed. I'm trying to let people know that this idea of not being something enough, Puerto Rican enough, Dominican enough, whatever it is,
Yeah.
right? We do this to ourselves. There's enough of the dominant culture out there trying to do that to us. We don't need to do it to each other.
To ourselves. Yeah, that intercommunal um hierarchy has been so destructive. I think the moment that Black and Brown and the other minority groups build a cross-cultural coalition, it's over for the white supremacy culture.
It's over.
Because
It's
the
over.
moment we all join forces, not only are we the majority minority or the minority majority in this nation, but the moment we can stop the intercommunal fighting amongst each other and stop this whole crabs in a barrel mentality, it is the day that we will see the end of this dominant culture trying to eliminate us, right? And I want to switch up really quick because we're on the interest of time.
Sure.
You and I both have danced. I'm a contemporary choreographer. My work mostly intersects disability and dance as a disabled person. But you and I first met through Ballet Hispanico's convening of Latinx dance leaders, where you were one of the speakers. And I believe you and I spoke at the same convening, if I remember
Yes,
correctly.
that's right.
And we talk about how salsa played an instrumental role in helping you reclaim your Puerto Rican, Nuyorican identity. Tell me how dancing salsa helped you and how you view your identity today.
Salsa helped me because in a number of ways. First, in two really important ways. Salsa is it is often said that salsa was created in Cuba, right? It was born in Cuba. The antecedent of salsa is the Cuban son and the Cuban rumba, right? These are the building blocks as well as other Afro-Caribbean forms and Spanish forms and things. And all of that is true. But salsa as we know it today is, in my view, primarily a New York Puerto Rican phenomenon, right?
Mm.
Like the art form that came from Cuba in the 1930s and 40s does not sound like the salsa that came from the 60s and 70s, right? It's a different sound, right? Because there was a New York Puerto Rican energy that was brought to it. And that is the sound that really got exported all over the world.
Yeah.
So for me, learning how to dance salsa in the mid 90s was fascinating because that was like a second wave, a second coming of this thing called salsa or mambo, right? The first wave was kind of this Palladium 1950s, 1960s iteration. And then it went dormant. It wasn't as popular because there were other dance forms like the hustle, like hip hop and all these other things. Merengue, right, had a boom, and then people rediscovered salsa.
Yeah.
And so that was what
Mark Anthony, right? From my generation, Mark Anthony made salsa. It was his album,
absolutely.
India, right? Like that. His albums were a staple on Saturday morning cleaning days, right? Like
Absolutely.
weekend, my mother blasted Mark Anthony at 7 o'clock in the morning, singing and dancing salsa while cleaning the house and yelling at me to get up and help.
No, you have to. You have to. That's part of the drill.
Yeah.
And so salsa had this renaissance. And so for me, it was absolutely inspiring to say, hey, wait a minute, I'm just one generation removed
Yeah.
from the people who created this thing and who made it a world global art form. That's something to take immense pride in. And
Yeah.
so number one, I saw myself reflected in an art form that had global currency, and that was just really important to me from a pride perspective.
Yeah.
But I think more importantly, I say not more, but just as importantly, Mark, was that dance was like, wait a minute, there's a whole other language here that I am now fluent in.
Mm.
I am fluent in the language of salsa because salsa, like any other spoken language, has grammar, vocabulary, it has context, it has subtext, it has history, it has dialect,
Code.
it
Yeah.
has code. People dancing on one as opposed to dancing on two, people dancing Cuban style, LA style, New York style, Caleño style. Like it is a very sophisticated language. And so it gave me this sense of, wait a minute, I have a new kind of fluency. I have fluency in a different kind of language and a different kind of way of building community around that language. And so even though my spoken Spanish improved over the years, that pales in comparison to this other fluency that I have in my body through the art form of salsa.
Yeah, it's so interesting because for as much as I struggle with speaking Spanish, you put on some salsa, you put on some merengue, and I'm gonna move my body. And it is just, I think I was telling you this before the interview started, and it's just so innate in my bones, right? The rhythm, the beat, the feeling. And that's why I understand everything when I'm dancing. Like that's why that part of the title just really resonated with me because, especially now living in the South, as a person who grew up in the Northeast and being perceived as white in Atlanta has been really trippy because I've never been perceived as white before until
Mm.
here. And it's because some people here don't have the experience of living in the Northeast and what that means to be a melting pot. But I remember going back to Puerto Rico for the first time as an adult last month for my birthday weekend. And it being such a healing moment in my adulthood. Like I was healing my inner child so much in that trip.
Believe it.
But while I was healing my inner Puerto Rican child, I was regressing as a queer adult and going back in the closet in some ways.
Mm.
My
Okay.
family has all this anxiety about being visibly queer on the island and how dangerous it can be. And so now I'm going back in a couple of days for work, and I have some amazing outfits planned. Like the outfits that you're used to seeing me wearing when I'm speaking and doing things and in work functions. And I said to myself, now when I go back, it's not about healing my inner child by suppressing my adult self. It's about healing my inner child and allowing myself to be fully seen as both Boricua and gay and gender non-conforming and disabled. Because I'm all those things in totality. There is no separating my queerness from my brownness or my crippledness from my gender non-conformity. I'm all those things in totality. And what I appreciate about you and what I appreciate about this book, I don't speak Spanish, but I understand everything when I'm dancing, is that you allow us to see the totality of all the things that make you you. So
Thank
thank you for writing this.
no, thank you, Mark. Thank you for and thank you for that. Thank you for that compliment, but more importantly, thank you for naming for your audience just the ways in which you are still going on your journey, the
Yeah,
way and the fact that it's never a one and done. It's
yeah,
never like, oh, when I went on this trip to Puerto Rico, everything was complete. No, this is life is iterative,
yeah,
and our process and our journey towards wholeness is iterative. And so
yeah,
for me, it was the first leg of my journey was, okay, let me do something about this spoken Spanish thing because that's where I was the most broken. And
mm,
I took a few steps in that direction and then took a few steps back because
yeah,
when I saw the reactions I was getting to my attempts to speak Spanish, I shut down again.
yeah.
And then I had to go through it again when my mom had another, my parents divorced when I was um, around 17. My mother remarried and she had another child. I have a baby sister who's 20 years my junior. And
Woo!
my mother raised her, guess what? Speaking only Spanish. And so I went through my childhood all over again when I
Yeah.
went to see my little sister because it was like, wait a minute, why are you doing it with her? Why didn't you do it with me?
It was a different time. She learned from you.
That's what I had, but I had to grow into that understanding. The first feeling is resentment,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
it took time to get to that place of understanding. Wait a minute, it was a different generation now.
yeah,
And so what you're naming is the difficult, sometimes painful work of stitching together that which was
yeah,
broken, maybe.
yeah.
And so we do it little by little. So I'm just so happy for you, and so I'm glad you're going to go back to Puerto
I
Rico
know.
and find new ways to, to be amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I ask every guest this question, but in the last couple of interviews, I've been shifting the format of the question, which is, if you had to describe this in one sentence, the answer in one sentence, what do you hope to shift society through your work in one sentence?
I hope to shift our. I'm going to say it's going to be a run-on sentence, Mark.
Yeah.
I hope to shift our Puerto Rican diasporic community, and by extension, the larger Latino community, and by extension, the larger immigrant and migrant community. But I want to start with our Puerto Rican diasporic community. I hope to shift our dialogue
Mm,
around language from language being the marker of Latinidad to simply one marker of Latinidad.
Yeah.
And not the most important one either.
Yeah.
Because there are so many ways to express our Puerto Ricanness, and the ability to speak in Spanish is but one of them. If I can shift that dialogue, that conversation a few degrees, this book will have been successful.
You've shifted it for me already. So count me as one of those people that your book has impacted. Earlier in the season, we had Ida Rodriguez, Puerto Rican, Dominican comedian from Miami, good with the Puerto Rican side.
Fantastic.
Thank you. And she has said in the interview, I am legitimate just because. No qualifiers needed, right? Right. And so you and I are Puerto Rican. We are legitimately Puerto Rican. And there's no amount of Spanish knowing or mastering of Spanish language, which is the colonizer's language, may I add, will ever make us legitimately Puerto Rican. We are Puerto Rican simply because that is our genetic, that is our culture, that's how we were raised, it's in our DNA, in our lineage to the island.
That's right.
Our lineage, our stories of being a Nuyorican, Jersey Rican, dancing men who are Puerto Rican. That is enough.
That's enough. That's the word right there.
That's enough. Y'all, be sure to check out Rodney's work. We'll be sure to link his website, his contact, his social medias in the show notes. And of course, you can get his book. I don't speak Spanish, but I understand everything when I'm dancing. We didn't get to talk about this cover, but this cover is one of the few, I think the only picture Rodney has of himself dancing as a young boy.
That's right.
And if you want to talk about the exploration of language, identity, and salsa, and connect back to your roots, despite language, or because of the language, actually, please check out this book. It is both moving and compelling. It gives you both historical context without sounding too academic. It gives you a human-centered approach to reclaiming, not just reclaiming, but claiming your identity just because. So thank you so much, Rodney, for being a guest on The Shift.
Thank you, Mark. I'm really, really privileged to be here with you. Thank you for the invitation.
Of course, anytime. Y'all, be sure to like, rate, subscribe, and share this podcast with the fellow Boricuas in your life who may not speak Spanish so they can see themselves reflected in this conversation. And share it with the Puerto Ricans in your life who make fun of people who don't speak Spanish well so they can be told about themselves. Because at the end of the day, all we have is one another. We're in this together. We can't do it alone. We were never meant to do it alone. And of all the things that white supremacy culture has taken from our people, our communal way of living is the thing that we need to get back to. Because it's not enough to pull ourselves up from a bootstrap when some of us don't have boots to wear.
Thank you.
Until next time, take care and be well.